Bobby's going to be quite a fisherman someday. And as you can see here, he's tied on to a real whopper. Counting young fishermen like Bobby, California now has well over 1.5 million anglers, and this number is increasing daily. The avid angler search for new waters and new methods is a never-ending one. This film is the unusual story of two anglers on a search for new fishing waters very close to home. Wally and I decided to make a trip by boat from the mouth up the American River to Nimbus Dam. It's only about 15 miles. We knew that every spring there was a tremendous spawning migration of shad up the Sacramento River and the American River. Now, Nimbus Dam here completely blocked this migration. Somewhere in this stretch of the river, there was sure to be a large number of shad. There was a definite feeling of satisfaction as we got underway. In a few minutes, we'd made a bend, and the fishermen at the mouth were out of sight. We had the American River all to ourselves and a feeling of being miles away from civilization. Only now and then, as we skimmed over the lower portion of the river, we would pass a lone fisherman, some bathers, or one of the few bridges to remind us that we were actually within sight of the dome of California's state capitol. By mid-afternoon, we had left the calmer waters of the lower American and were in a stretch of river that's a series of large pools connected by short riffles and runs. This was shad water. We came to a beautiful long pool with a high bank on one side, so we beached the boats to stretch our legs and examine the pool from the bank. We were also on the lookout for a place to camp. Lunch had been passed up, and the thought of the steaks in our portable ice chest was fighting a winning battle with our thoughts of shad. In the spring of the year, the shad move up the rivers and streams from the ocean to spawn. They migrate in schools. They swim near the surface and can often be spotted in the large pools. Even though they may stay in a particular pool for several hours or several days, they're continually on the go. None were visible in this pool, so Tuck got a chance at his favorite sport. Tuck's an English setter, not a retriever, but sometimes I wonder. He'd rather swim than eat. This looked to me like a good place to camp for the night, and when I got back to the boat, Wally said this pool was too good to pass up without trying. After a few casts, he tied into something in spite of Tuck's chasing sticks. Pretty hard to tell what it was right at first. Good size, lots of power. Sure enough, bluish-white, broad body, a surface fighter. Short, powerful runs. There was no doubt now Wally and his wobbler had tied into old White Lightning himself. The battle was hard, fast, and continuous. The shad never let up. He stayed near the surface, in the current, and took full advantage of the force of the water on his wide, flat body. The force created by the shad in his style of fighting requires a rod with plenty of power in the butt section. And yet the lures that appeal to shad are small, even in the 1/10 ounce class. This makes a rod with a light tip action a must. We fished the pool hard from one end to the other and with a wide variety of lures, but by the time darkness caught up with us, we were convinced by the lack of action that Wally's fish was a straggler. So we hit the deck. The next morning, we got a good early start. Much earlier than I thought was necessary, but Wally, without a cot or air mattress, was up and around bright and early. Once underway, we started to look for shad in earnest. This was a beautiful stretch of river, crystal clear, beautiful pools, and ideal riffle. When possible, we scanned every pool from the overhanging bluffs. By 10 o'clock, we were only a couple of miles below the crossing where we had arranged to meet Jimmy Green, one of our old fishing partners. It was Wally's turn to climb the bluff, and this one paid off. This was the pool. I couldn't see a thing, so I didn't lose any time in climbing up for a better view. There they were, not by the hundreds, but by the thousands. Everywhere you looked, the water was teeming with shad. It was almost unbelievable. I'd never seen or heard of anything like this. We found out later that when schools of shad break the surface, as they were doing here, they were actually spawning. As much as we both wanted to get to fishing, one of us had to go up to the crossing and tell Jimmy. I lost, so I lightened the load and took off. The boats we were using were designed for fishing. Primarily intended to handle one fisherman, they easily carry two. They're not expensive, they have a substantial beam, and being made of plywood, they're very light. They're ideal for fishing small streams, sloughs, lagoons, and lakes. By boat, an angler not only covers more water, but he can fish each pool from the most advantageous spot. Tuck was enjoying the trip, and our guess on Jimmy paid off. There he was, standing waist deep in a fast riffle with a mouthful of fly line. Jimmy Green is one of the top-notch shad fishermen of the West. He's always praising this poor man's steelhead. When I beached the boat, he walked over and told me he'd been there since sunup and hadn't had a strike. It was a little hard to convince him that we'd found them in such large numbers down below. But it wasn't hard to convince him he should go down and give it a try. So we climbed in the boat with Tuck and me, and we took off back downstream. Jimmy's one of the outstanding fly casters in the country. When he was only 17 years old, he competed in Paris, France, where he set 5 world records. He now works for the Sunset Line and Twine Company. His primary responsibility is to develop new techniques in fishing. It's a job that takes him to all the best fishing waters in the country. No, it's no use asking. I already have, and he doesn't need an assistant. Jimmy's not a purist, but if it's at all possible to use a fly rod, he will. When he saw the shad, he was ready to put it to work. His favorite shad hookup is the Stream King shooting head backed with Flexon monofilament. I had been looking forward to trying this arrangement and brought along the necessary components. The principle of the shooting head backed by Flexon is the same as the principle used in the torpedo tapered line. The advantages of the shooting head arrangement are several. The weight balance and distribution is better, the line sinks more quickly, and the almost total absence of friction of Flexon on the guides can increase your distance by as much as 50%. Shad flies are wet flies. In fact, most of them are weighted. They're sparsely tied, consisting generally of a tinsel-wrapped body on a number 4 or 6 sprout hook, a red or yellow head, a brief shoulder hackle, and a wisp of red hair for a tail. After taking one look at the school of shad from up on the bluff, Jimmy went down below and started to work on them. The fish actually brushed against his legs at times. The only thing wrong was that the shad weren't striking. For better than 20 minutes, Jimmy worked the pool hard and never had a strike. This frustrating experience was the first indication of what we now know. That is, schools of spawning shad do not strike readily. More in desperation than in hopes of catching a fish, Jimmy moved down below the pool and started to work the long slick between the pool and the fast water below. He'd pick the line up off the water with a powerful roll cast, make one or two false casts, and let her go. The way that shooting head would strip the flexon backing out and carry that weighted fly was a sight to see. He'd cast directly across the stream, dropping the fly right next to the far bank. And as the current swept the fly downstream in an arc, he continually worked the fly up and down with a slow, jerky movement. He'd make a cast or two and then drop downstream a step or two. Wango! Then it happened. Instinctively, Jimmy reared back and set the hook. The shad took off downstream, headed for the ocean. Stopped by Jimmy, Mr. Shad came up to look around and see what was holding him back. He took one look and then made another try for the ocean. He was fighting mad. As often as not, in one of these first two tactical moves, the shad will tear loose. They're soft-mouthed, and there's nothing you can do about it. They fight hard and fast, quickly wearing themselves out. The average 3 or 4 pound shad has landed in about 7 or 8 minutes. There's no class for shad in established game fish tournaments, so there's no way of telling what the largest shad taken with rod and reel has been. Smoked shad is one of Jimmy's favorite snacks, but this fish was not injured, and the prospects now of tangling with more shad were excellent. So Jimmy sent him back to school. Meanwhile, I moved down to the slick. It was quite surprising to see how easy it was to pick up the fundamentals of casting with the shooting head. Not as graceful as Jimmy, but nevertheless, in a matter of minutes, I was fast to my first shad on a fly rod. And brother, I'll tell you, it was a real thrill. It was only then that I realized what a tremendous game fish the shad is. Introduced into California waters in 1871 as a commercial fish, this fighting cousin of the well-known tarpon and bonefish had been practically ignored by California sportsmen. Shad are still so abundant that the seasons and bag limits are very liberal. After this experience, and many just like it, there is no doubt in my mind that the descriptive phrases white lightning and poor man's steelhead have been justly earned. Inch for inch and pound for pound, the shad's fighting ability is unexcelled. The irony of the situation was this. Here, less than 20 miles from my home, were unbelievable numbers of this fish, offering any angler many hours of pleasure with its fly or spinning rod. And yet, with the thousands of fishermen in the Sacramento area, only a few had taken advantage of it. Well, beginner's luck, such as it is, I landed that first shad. That is, Tuck and I landed it. Later, after all three of us had hooked a lot and landed a few, Jimmy gave us a lesson in distance fly casting. First, he explained the importance of the grip. Grasp the rod in this manner. The thumb is placed on top with the heel of the hand in a direct line below. In this way, the thumb can be used to obtain the maximum leverage on the rod. In casting, you pull from the heel and push with the thumb. Pull, push. Use the full arm. In this way, the arm is actually an extension of the rod. This creates a greater leverage and enables the angler to cast a greater distance. If the elbow is held close to the body, it reduces the reach and also limits the amount of pressure you can effectively place on the rod through your thumb, and your casting distance is considerably reduced. The back cast should be high. The pull is released early in the back cast, but the rod continues to drift back. Not only does Jimmy make it sound easy, he also makes it look easy. With a Dacron shooting head and the proper fly rod, the practiced angler can cast consistently from 65 to 75 feet. A few anglers are able to reach 100 to 110 feet, such as you see Jimmy doing here. Distance is not always necessary in fly fishing for shad or any other fish, but it's nice to be able to call on it when needed. Now here is the fly rod we use for shad. This is the Falcon, model 7102. It's a two-piece, 9-foot tubular glass conlon. The tip action is medium and allows the desired delicacy in casting. And yet the reinforced butt section provides the necessary power to pick up the heavy Dacron shooting head and combat the powerful force of the shad. Well, it was getting late in the day, and we had to get on up the stream. We dropped Jimmy off at the riffle where we had picked him up. And as we took off upstream, Jimmy was going out to give it just one more try before calling it a day. As for Wally and myself, our fishing time for the weekend had run out. It was time for us to hightail it on up to the dam and get on home. The closer we got to the dam, the stronger the current became. However, we had no difficulty in pulling right up to where our wives had parked the Jeep. Well, folks, since that first trip, we've made a good many shad excursions on the American. In fact, that map we showed you at the start of this get-together was a result of these numerous shad fishing trips. Well, to get back to the map, here is Nimbus Dam, where we picked up the Jeep. These small diamonds along the river are a few of the fishing hotspots we have located on our fishing trips. If you would like to have a copy of this map, it's yours for the asking. All you have to do is drop a card to Bob Reedy, Post Office Box 4152, Sacramento, California.